All right, to avoid sounding too much like a donut operator, hello and welcome to another episode of the Full Metal Cast. I'm going to be shaking up the order in which the episode is sort of structured or how it starts. I'm going to start trying to give a little bit of an intro to the quote and to the episode so that you know what you're about to get into for the next 30 minutes to an hour or plus, depending on how many guests and how many things I have to talk about. This week, obviously, as you can tell by the title, Bloodless Coup. It has to do with the state just completely disregarding the democratic process and the rules and the checks and balances, and them just going ahead and anointing who is allowed to appear on the ballot and who is able to run for president versus letting you, the people, vote and have your say on who gets to represent you in the most powerful chair in the world. That's all I guess I'll share on that before getting into the monologue. But the quote, for my gamers out there, you will recognize from the critically acclaimed Elden Ring. I heard it when the game first came out and said, damn, I'm going to keep that in my back pocket because that goes a little hard. Is it rather stoic? Yep. Is it rather motivating? Yep, in the sense that it encourages one to not let time just pass them by and to have them squander their abilities and their potential. So with that, we'll just jump right into it. Make of thyself that which ye desire, be it a lord, be it a god, but should ye fail to become aught at all, ye will be forsaken, amounting only to sacrifices. Melina, Elden Ring. While mainstream media is thankfully losing steam, it still has its claws buried deep in the American populace. And whether that be due to the legacy status or just our tendency as humans to seek out and submit to authority figures, see the Milgram experiment. That experiment being the one where an individual, just a random individual off the street in a lab coat, was able to convince people to torture and deliver lethal amounts of electricity to a fake test subject. And sort of the findings of that experiment concluded that people will simply appeal to figures of authority and just trust in them because they think that they're experts and that they know best. But the masses will look to politicians in the exact same way as they do to media, or those in lab coats for that matter. We see them as vessels of truth and pursuers of noble causes. Everything that spews from their mouths, we drink up without hesitation or a filter. If this weren't the case, the events that took place after the first debate would never have transpired. Yet somehow, an entire nation was able to be gaslit into thinking the stroked-out geriatric incontinent pedophile that had been running the country was of sound mind and the best for the job for the better part of 4 years. It wasn't until your elected officials, your servants, and their mouthpieces in the press realized that they could not keep up the facade in order to remain in power. Therefore, they let you know that you are now to think differently, and in the course of 4 weeks, the standing president, who has done the best job of bringing down inflation, growing jobs and wages and so on, was suddenly the harbinger of the fall of our democracy, as he would surely hand this country over to Trump, should he refuse to step down and anoint a stronger, pre-approved candidate that had a better shot at victory. And because so many people slurped this narrative up at face value, God, that's a gross word, the people of the U.S. have allowed and even cheered on their federal government to completely shit all over the quote-unquote sacred democracy they told us they sought to defend. The most popular president in history was bullied and abused into not running again, and rather than we, the people, voting, because it matters so much and can change the course of this country, we have been told time and time again, on who might represent them best in his absence, the government has chosen without any input from you, their boss, the person who pays their salary, and their only reason to exist. The people by and large fail to realize that the state never acts in our interest, and just like a monopolistic corporation without oversight or accountability, the state will only seek to serve itself every chance it gets, slaughtering morals and anything else that might get in the way of profit and the proliferation of their reign. Thus, why they did not even select a half-decent candidate to run in place of the standing president. Just one that will continue carrying out the bidding of the state with blind obedience. And if you take anything away from this, just know your vote, truly means nothing. The democracy is long gone. It was stolen from you without a shot being fired. The political class is now able to decide who appears on the ballot, which, to be fair, has always been the case, but now it could not be more blatant, as they do not even bother with keeping up the facade. And I know I've only been aiming my rhetoric at one particular side of the political aisle so far, but fret not, for I hate the Republicans and Trump just as much as I do the Dems and Biden or Harris. And I do so because there is zero difference between them. This is an epiphany that would serve the masses well to be enlightened by, but for the sake of appearing unbiased, the right is just as susceptible to the propaganda. I mean, all you need to reference here is the stupid fucking ear bandages you saw at the RNC after Trump was shot, and the images of him being portrayed as Jesus. I mean, I shared it to my story. There was even one, like, it looked like a painting of the white, our version of white Jesus, with Trump's, like, ear bandage on. And, excuse me, but are you out of your fucking mind? One, I know for a fact that spits right in the face of whatever religion these sheep are subscribed to. And two, worshiping a politician has never been a good idea. They are all born with God complexes and have only ever served their best interests, so there is no need to pour any more gas on that fire unless you're a fan of bread and front lines. Anyways, here we are now, though. One, the political class now decides who appears on the ballot, not your vote, not the democratic process. And two, most of the country seeks to use said ballot as a weapon to enslave those with opposing political beliefs for no other reason than fandom stoked by propaganda. All the while, everyone not members of the political class are left worse off with every passing second. And still, to this day, people fail or simply cannot wrap their smooth little minds around not voting. The way I see it, though, is there are few acts of protest, acts of true defiance that wholly reject the state, and refusing to participate in the circus, to refuse to support the system from the very start, is one way to do that without any sacrifice. People appear to be more receptive to riots, wars, and crime rather than when someone reveals that they do not vote. Even the state has imprisoned people for sharing memes about elections and voting. They've locked up those who simply have asked for increased visibility into elections in the democratic process. And looking at it from a different perspective, if you would boycott Bud Light, institutions that support Israel, or only support businesses based on gender, skin color, or sexuality of the owner, how can you not also see that refraining from voting serves the same purpose? If you would take such stances in matters as trivial as selecting one brand over another that makes a nearly identical product, why would we not adopt the same standard when it comes to us becoming slaves more every single day? But this is just how I see it. I am not one to tell you how to spend your time, how to live your life, or what you should do, and I made that very clear from the beginning of this podcast. I only have my own life experience. That's it, and I will only speak to that and about that. I will never tell you that you should do as I do or do as I say. I will only share my perspective, and if you agree with it, cool. If you don't agree with it, even better. That's what makes this place great. That's how ideas are able to evolve and develop. But all that to say, this is not me encouraging you to go overthrow the democratic process. I'm going to leave it at that. Personally, I just refuse to participate in the world's least transparent popularity contest between two billionaires who were only allowed to appear on the ballot by promising kickbacks to corporations or their colleagues. This is because it has never mattered who won the election, because those who vote are left with fewer freedoms year after year, and we are incapable in voting on things that matter to us during our glorious elected leader's reign. Think of Ukraine, think of Israel, think of the IRS expanding larger than the active Canadian military, think of the Supreme Court decisions, think of the COVID lockdowns and vax mandates, etc., etc. And these things do matter regardless of how you think a democracy should work, since many of these things are just not discussed during the campaign or are just straight up violations of campaign promises that were made to garner votes or dollars, funding also, obviously. The most important matter in a campaign. Again, just like that monopolistic corporation, they have zero accountability to us. We have no recourse should our representatives break the law, cease serving our interest, or harm us. They can rape this country and others for their own benefit to no end, and we just have to survive until the next election, when, just like the boycott similarities I mentioned earlier, you are presented with nearly the exact same options, just like every election that came before. And calling back to an old episode on false empowerment, voting is no different than worshiping your star sign. Whether Mercury is in the microwave or if you're an Aquarium rising is just as empty and shallow as the belief that there are two political parties, that the state provides us with safety and stability while safeguarding our freedoms, and that by participating in the sacred act of voting, your voice is heard and can change the country according to your beliefs via another human being holding more money than you will ever see in your life and who is beholden to absolutely nobody other than themselves and will be in a position of power to only further amass wealth thanks to your tax dollars. And in that context, I really do hate to say it, worshiping the stars doesn't sound so crazy, does it? So cool. I don't vote. Maybe you don't either. But what does that do exactly? Well, similar to growing and raising your own food and educating your own children and no longer outsourcing you and your family's safety to the state, it is another step in decentralizing and completely purging the state from your life. And regardless of how big or small said step is, any step in that direction historically is a good one. Again, just my perspective, but I will not cast a ballot and put my stamp of approval on a single politician that has ever came or will ever come. There isn't a single one of them I trust with that, and I wish to never be associated with them or their actions. As a reminder, every genocide, every war, and every large-scale human atrocity has always been carried out by a government or some form of state. Therefore, if I can reject the state at every single opportunity that presents itself, I will. And I will, knowing that regardless of whatever hardship transpires in my life from removing the state from it, I would rather endure the trials on my feet than live a long life on my knees. Today, things seem to be moving faster than the human mind can even process, and on top of that, the impact that these events have on a global level is almost impossible to ignore. That being said, I have always said and will always say to not become slaves to externals, the things that Stoics have identified as being outside of your control. Focus on you, your family, and your community. That is all you can do at the end of the day. If you cannot expand your sphere of control, leave what is outside of it alone and pay no mind. I will end with this, though. At the end of the day, for those who believe that the state is too large and powerful to submit to the will of we, the people, I have always said the state will never be capable enough to keep you safe, as they prove that every day and time again. But they proved at the highest level they are incapable of keeping themselves safe. The two-party system was successful in dividing the populace by preying on the frail minds of man, to call back to a pillar. However, all politicians wear a red coat and white wig. And if the majority of countries saw the shooter's target donning the same attire, we all would have seen the shooter's name with the likes of Paul Revere's, Jefferson's, and so on in the history books that we read throughout every class growing up. It's a matter of perspective in that case, isn't it? The two-party system has allowed there to be such an extreme chasm in reactions, and just an extreme difference in reactions to that event. And while I do subscribe to Tolstoy's sort of anarchistic flavor of absolute nonviolence, looking at the event in that context, I think, is very interesting as it relates to the temperature in America today. How we encourage the complete and utter shattering of the laws and of the regulations of the Constitution and of this great sacred democracy for our team, but certainly not the other. And how one side can say, oh, it's absolutely tragic that this could happen to, a former president and soon-to-be president, while the others can say, I wish he didn't miss. And you will never be able to get away from that, or you'll never be able to find a complete level ground where we can all agree on with a two-party system. That's just by design. But I think if you look back to seeing every single one of them as a redcoat who literally the only way they get paid is by stealing your tax dollars from you, and I can say stealing, whether you pay by, if you pay voluntarily or not, they are still stealing, because even if you didn't pay, you're going straight to jail and they will steal everything from you anyways at that point. I totally forgot where that trail was heading. They steal your tax dollars for their own salary. They break the rules to further line their own pockets, and they make the world a less safer place for you so that they can make it safer for them. That's how they prove their own worth. That's how they prove that we need them. By creating instability and insecurity, they need a need to survive and to live on, so they create said need. If we started looking at every single one of them like that, instead of like God figures, like kings and queens that are so noble and are just pure fountains of truth and knowledge and wisdom, I think we'd start agreeing a little more on some of the events that started taking place. I think we'd be able to acknowledge that a real insurrection, by definition, took place with the anointing of the next nominee to appear on the ballot, rather than calling what happened on January 6th the next 9/11. And again, I hate both sides with the same amount of fervor. But objectively, if you call that an insurrection, I don't even know if you've watched a violent movie in that case, because that's just a CNN talking point that you're parroting, very embarrassingly, I will say. The real insurrection took place, again, without any blood being spilled, without any bullets being fired, simply from a letter being sent from the president's doctor, not even the president himself, it would appear. It's happening very quickly, very rapidly. It's happening in front of everybody and for all to see on the largest stage possible. And yet I still have hope. And sort of taking now, I guess, stepping out of the political climate for this, looking at this just on like a human behavior scale. The former president, soon-to-be president's life was almost taken. The country didn't devolve into madness. And again, I even shared my thoughts that even if it was, I don't think it would have. I think certain pockets might have. I think that provides me a great deal of hope. The CrowdStrike outage as well, a wide-scale, complete debacle that shut down flights, the banking system, businesses, everything. I didn't see anybody looting or rioting in that face as well. And I say all this to prove that it's not the government that provides stability or peace or safety. It's you, it's your family, it's your neighbors, it's the people you surround yourself with. And hopefully they are all decent human beings that respect the natural rights of other human beings. The state didn't step in and provide stability when CrowdStrike nuked the infrastructure. The state didn't step in and provide stability when your representative's life was taken. In fact, they tried to make it a little less stable by withholding all the information and making it as unbelievable as possible. And I'll continue to look at big events like that in that sort of context. It's not the state that keeps you safe. It's not the state that holds the fabric of society together. It's us returning the grocery carts. It's definitely not by voting. I don't think a single vote that has ever been cast in the history of this nation has ever supported safety and stability in this country, at least not for us. For the political class, it absolutely has, and for bankers and corporations, it absolutely has, but not for us. And I will say, and I will hold, and I will end on this, that every single aspect of life, today as it stands, if it were stripped from the grip of government, if the government was completely removed from it and people were allowed to freely oversee it, to freely interact with it, life would be better off. And then immediately I know the argument to that is, well, you're going to have bad actors. You have bad actors today and the state still cannot keep you safe. The only difference is if we, the people, were to step in to stop said bad actors, we get slapped down by the legal system, by paperwork, by fines, by fees, by the threat of jail time for doing the right thing, the moral right thing, simply because only the government has a monopoly on violence, a monopoly that they are not willing to break up or cede even a little bit. However, without them, if you let communities sort of self-police themselves, I don't see that issue happening anymore. If a bad actor were to wander into or observe a community that is highly self-sufficient, that is highly capable of sort of sniffing out the bad actors and protecting its own, they would never dare do or prey upon that community. But today you're left with communities that are not allowed to or discouraged from doing said thing in some areas with gun-free zones and weapon-free zones. It's completely illegal to do that. You simply must trust in the monopoly on violence to keep you safe against said bad actors. And it doesn't work, because time and time again you see it fail with any mass shooting, any school shooting, any time there's an incident on a New York subway, the war zones that have broken out in California and Chicago, and et cetera, et cetera. If you also remove government from it, I think businesses would work a lot more morally as well. You fear your neighbor at that point. You fear slighting your neighbor and hurting those closest to you that also support you. You don't fear the hand of government so much that may or may not see you in what you're doing, and you may be able to get away with it because simply you pay taxes and you may have just slighted one person. But if you slight your neighbor and that neighbor has an actual immediate route of recourse, I'm not talking just capital punishment here, I'm talking just immediately being able to get involved and solve the issue and find a solution without having to get lawyers and the courts and all those sorts of bureaucratic bullshit involved that the government says is required. Things work a lot more effectively and a lot more morally. You get rid of zoning, you get rid of all this other stuff as well. People have a better say in how they want their communities to look. The park across the street maybe doesn't get turned into an apartment complex because the developer, the commercial real estate firm, isn't giving kickbacks to the state, which got them the permits to do that. The people get to say, I want nature close to me. I don't want to be looking at a fucking commercial property in my own backyard, and I don't want you tearing down and destroying the earth for that, for your own bottom line. And I can give examples time after time again. It's just the framework that I exist in, and it's a tough one to get into, obviously. The propaganda works. People need the state, whether they believe that is for, or they think they need the state rather, whether that be for they think it is for stability and security, or if it's just because they need to root for their team so the other side doesn't win. Doesn't matter. In every scenario that I can conceive, I can see a world, a better world, where the state does not exist, and your own communities are able to sort of manage themselves and police themselves and grow themselves. Now, obviously, this is all very idyllic. This is all a very local example. This completely disregards the fact that our governments have pissed off other governments across the world who have very large military capabilities and nuclear weapons as well, and that them coming over and taking each individual community isn't impossible. It'd be very difficult, yes, because I do see in that case the community sort of banding together, all voluntarily, of course, because we don't need the threat of the bayonet to act in our own interest. But yeah, I won't continue chewing your ear off with that idea. I'd be happy to hear, though, if there's any examples where you do think the government, we do need the government and their existence provides a greater benefit than the scenario without them, because I simply cannot comprehend that. My favorite one is roads. Motherfucker, roads have been around long before government was ever around, so keep trying. People will fill the need where it is. Government is the bottleneck. It's the cancer. It's the parasite. It will always and forever be the inflammatory issue. It will always and forever be a problem that will hinder the expansion of the human consciousness, the promotion of freedom, the promotion of moral behavior. Get rid of them, everything works for the best, keep taking steps to get rid of them in your own life. Maybe you do still vote. I'm not telling you not to. I'm simply telling you how I go about it every day. But I think that's going to be it. I'm recording this on my lunch hour, so I'm going to have to start heading back to the good old 9 to 5 here. Let's see, what do we got coming up? Stuff on the website. Got a couple humidors that are ready to ship. If you want to buy a full metal humidor, the best humidor on the market. Again, made from surplus military 50 cal ammo cans lined with Spanish cedar and waterproof on the inside. The seal actually helps you not only retain humidity at the perfect level you want it at, but it also keeps your cigars dry should you be at the beach about rainy weather. Honestly, a superior product I'm very proud to admit. So feel free to pick those up. I believe all that are available. Oh no, I have stenciling available, stenciling visible and invisible. The stenciling invisible obviously being cheaper. I got a pallet of cans, for whatever reason, have no stenciling on them. All the stenciling visible models that I have are all 50 cal. They will say like 50 cal, like that's what it was used for to carry when they were in service. So those are always cool, love those. The Pride drop stuff, those are gonna remain on the site to buy just because, why not? I think it's so goddamn funny. So pick up a flag, pick up a shirt, pick up a slap, make fun of the Michigan Department of Transportation because they are indeed gay. Oh, yep. Oh, yes, I almost forgot. Inspired by some other drops that have come out for other companies, also playing with the idea of some brass cuffs. I ordered a sample, playing around with the supplier, which font, which text I want on it. So look forward to brass cuffs getting dropped on the website. There will be a limited amount available. I thought that'd be fun to do. So keep an eye out for those. I think that's gonna be it though. I'll sign off with that, and hopefully there's no huge, tremendous world-shaking event that takes place before next week. But until then, stay safe, stay happy, stay free. Don't become slaves to what I even talked about on here. Don't let it weigh on you. Don't let it sort of be a doom-scrolling thing where you spiral out of control with it. Go outside, do things you love, even if they are just sort of for fun activities that aren't very productive. They're healthy. You got to be happy. There's no point in living this life and going about doing what you're doing if you're not happy. That is part of your purpose. Yes, living morally is definitely part of it, but being happy is just as equally, it's close to being as important as living a moral life. Like if you're not happy, what's the fucking point? So until then, stay metal. Thank you.
Oh,